The creature lay in a slurry of its own fluids, wheezing erratically under the cold lights of the Arkallis 4 medical bay. It was massive, roughly the length of a delivery truck, with thick, scale-like plates along its back and a neck that sagged under its own weight. Its skin had dulled from deep emerald to a sickly gray. Tubes connected to its limbs dripped something clear and synthetic into its system, but the rhythmic chime of monitors implied failure more than hope. 3 alien medics stood over it, exchanging clipped phrases in Uruvian, a language that sounded like dry leaves crumpling underwater. The lead medic, a tall, bioluminescent being named Arkallis, turned away from the beast and deactivated the monitor with a long, spindly finger. "It will not recover," Arkallis said, his translator box humming. The second, smaller alien barrel frowned and adjusted a scanning lens over one eye. "Cardiac nodes are collapsing. Nervous feedback is disordered. We've administered every stabilizer we have. The creature is incompatible with our therapies," Arkallis said. "We've exhausted protocol." The third, a squat, tusked medic named Varn, huffed. "We should euthanize it. It's in pain." "No," said a low voice from the doorway. All 3 medics turned as a human stepped into the bay, his boots squelching slightly on the antiseptic floor. He was tall, bearded, and wore a worn field coat with patches sewn unevenly across the sleeves. His name was Russell Janick. "I was told there was a cargo beast down," Russell said. "That it wasn't going to make it." Arkallis gestured toward the creature. "That is correct. It is dying. We've administered all known treatments." Russell walked closer, squinting at the creature. "And none of you thought to check for intestinal torsion?" Varn blinked slowly. "How would you know of such a condition?" "I don't," Russell replied. "Not in your species. But I've seen enough cattle and rescue dogs go under with similar symptoms. That bloated gut, the erratic breathing, the way it's favoring its left side? Looks like something's cutting off circulation inside." Arkallis frowned. "We have scanned for internal anomalies. Nothing showed conclusive. You scanned it with your tech." "Let me try something simpler." Arkallis hesitated. "You are not licensed for interspecies medicine." "Neither were you," Russell said, kneeling beside the beast. "Until you tried." "I'm not asking permission. I'm trying to save it." There was a long silence before Arkallis stepped aside. "You assume responsibility." Russell nodded and reached into his coat. "Fair enough." He pulled out a battered medical kit. It looked archaic compared to the sleek equipment around him, but he moved with confidence. First, he checked the creature's gums, gently lifting its lip with a gloved hand. Pale and dry. Then he pressed gently along its abdomen, feeling for tension or swelling. "Bingo," he muttered. "It's got a blockage, all right." Varn leaned closer. "You can feel that?" "Yeah," Russell said. "It's hard as a rock right here. I need to decompress the gut before it shuts down completely." He glanced up. "Do you have any tubing? Flexible, about a meter long. Doesn't have to be sterile, just clean." Beryl scurried off and returned moments later with a length of coiled tubing. Russell inserted one end into the creature's mouth, maneuvering it slowly and carefully. When he hit resistance, he adjusted the angle slightly and pushed again. A moment later, the tubing jerked as pressure released inside the beast. A foul-smelling gas escaped, sharp and sour. The creature groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated the floor. "There we go," Russell said. "Now we're getting somewhere." Arkallis observed silently, arms folded. "This is effective?" "I wouldn't call it a cure," Russell said. "But it's breathing easier. That's a start." For the next 2 hours, Russell worked steadily. He flushed the beast's system with warm saline, monitored its heart rate manually with a stethoscope, and applied gentle massage to its abdomen to promote circulation. The medics watched in stunned silence, occasionally handing him tools or adjusting lighting. By the end of it, the creature's color had started to return. Its eyelids fluttered and its breathing had evened out. "You've stabilized it," Arkallis said finally, his voice unreadable. "For now," Russell replied. "It'll need rest, fluids, and a proper diet. But it's not dying anymore." Varn stepped forward. "You used no nanotechnology, no regenerative agents. Just fluids and touch. Sometimes that's enough," Russell said. "You were treating it like a machine." "It's not. It's an animal." Beryl looked at him with something bordering on awe. "You are not a doctor?" "Veterinarian," Russell said. "Back on Earth. I used to work with rescue shelters and ranch animals. Big ones. Small ones. Sick ones. Arkallis approached the creature, watching its chest rise and fall. You have altered its prognosis with rudimentary care. Russell stood up slowly. No. I just listened to what it was trying to tell me. Later that night, Russell sat alone in the corner of the mebe, sipping from a tin cup of rehydrated coffee. The creature slept peacefully under a thermal blanket, occasionally twitching its legs. A young Arkallian technician approached him shyly. Sir, the medics are discussing your methods in the command hall. They say it is unprecedented. Russell didn't look up. It's not. It's just overlooked. The technician hesitated. They want to know what you call the procedure. Russell grunted. Basic care. The technician nodded slowly, then left. The next morning, the creature stirred. Russell was already by its side, checking its vitals. Its eyes opened sluggish, confused, but aware. Easy, Russell said softly, placing a hand on its neck. You're still here? The creature blinked once. Arkallis entered, carrying a datapad. Its vitals have stabilized overnight. Mobility is returning. Good, Russell said. I want to try feeding it. Something bland. We have nutrient paste. No, Russell said. That stuff's too rich. Got any plain starch or fiber? Something like boiled root? Arkallis paused. We can synthesize similar texture. Do it. By the third day, the creature was standing. Unsteady but upright. Russell led it around the enclosure slowly, letting it lean on his shoulder when needed. It walked with effort but determination. On the fourth day, it ate. Not much, but enough. Russell sat nearby, bruised and exhausted from being shoved into a wall when the creature stumbled. Nothing broken, just sore. Still, he didn't complain. Arkallis approached him while the creature rested. You have altered our understanding of this species. Your methods will be documented. Fine by me, Russell said. Just don't forget the part where you gave up. Arkallis tilted his head. Why did you persist? Russell looked at the creature. Back home, we get a lot of animals dropped off because people think they're too far gone. I've seen dogs with broken spines walk again. Cows with twisted guts survive when everyone said they wouldn't. You don't give up just because the machines say it's over. You trust instinct. I trust observation. And compassion. Arkallis was silent for a long time. Then he said, would you stay? Help us develop protocols for other species? Russell raised an eyebrow. You want to hire me? We want to understand what you understand. He considered it. The thought of staying on an alien ship working with beings who thought in graphs and scans instead of touch and tone was daunting. But the creature, now dozing peacefully, mumbled in its sleep. A deep, throaty purr. Russell smiled. Yeah, I'll stay. But I need better coffee. Arkallis blinked. That can be arranged. Russell stood and stretched, his joints popping. Let's get to work. That beast isn't going to train itself to eat right. And so, the Arkallis 4 medical division changed forever, not with a miracle drug or new technology, but with a man from Indiana who once rehabilitated a goat with pneumonia using warm blankets, patience, and a lot of boiled carrots. 3 days after the creature stood on its own, Russell found himself elbow-deep in its food trough, muttering under his breath as he sifted through the latest feeding attempt. This isn't pulp. It's glue with ambition, he said, holding up a clump that jiggled ominously. Beryl hovered nearby, tablet in hand, antennae twitching. We followed your nutritional ratio. Fiber to starch was exactly as ordered. Sure, Russell said, flicking the lump back into the trough with a wet slap, but you boiled the fiber until it surrendered. It's supposed to provide bulk, not dissolve into soup. You ever chewed on raw beetroot? Beryl hesitated. No, exactly. Get me something with structure. I need crunch. Texture. Something this creature can work its gut around. We assumed less resistance would ease digestion. Yeah, and now we've got constipation with an attitude. From across the enclosure, the beast groaned and shifted its massive hindquarters. Its tail thudded lazily against the padded wall, and a faint, wet sound followed. Beryl blinked. That may have resolved. No thanks to your paste, Russell said. He stood, wiping his hands with a rag that had long since given up trying to look clean. We're going to need a real feeding schedule. Not just calories, timing, variety, palatability. You folks ever heard of appetite stimulation? That is not a standard metric. Russell reached for the slate he'd wedged between two storage containers. It is now. We're gonna rotate flavors. Introduce mild bitter every third meal. Keeps the gut alert. You keep feeding it the same goop and it'll shut down out of protest. Kellex entered, glancing at the creature before addressing Russell. You requested a behavioral scan. Russell nodded. Yeah. I want to know if it's reacting to voices, movement, maybe even music. Music? Some animals twitch when they hear string instruments. Others calm down. I once had a pig that only fell asleep to the sound of banjos. We don't know what this thing's used to. Kellex hesitated, then tapped a command into his device. A soft, layered hum filled the enclosure, rising and falling like distant wind over hollow reeds. The creature lifted its head, ears flicking. Its eyes moved slowly toward the source. Beryl leaned in. That's Arkallian lull form, typically used to soothe nervous neonates. Russell watched closely. Its vitals are steady. No tension in the jaw. That's something. Would you like more samples? Yeah, Russell said. Cycle through different things. Dissonance, percussion, even silence. I'm trying to map its reactions. Kellex cycled to a thudding rhythm that pulsed through the floor. The creature flinched subtly, then exhaled and lowered its head. That's not fear, Russell said. That's memory. Something familiar. You assume a past. I assume nothing. I observe. Kellex paused. We did not consider past experiences. Only current condition. That's the difference, Russell said. You treat symptoms. I treat a life. The creature gave a low, vibrating sound somewhere between a growl and a sigh. Russell reached out and laid a hand on its flank. That's not pain, he said. That's recognition. Later that cycle, after the creature had fallen into a deep sleep, Russell sat in the observation alcove with Varn. You know, Varn said, several departments have submitted requests to review your data logs. They want to know how you extracted compliance without sedation. Sedation's a shortcut, Russell said, sipping lukewarm broth. You can't train trust with tranquilizers. Varn studied him. It is expected to obey verbal commands soon? It's not a drone, Russell said. We're not programming it. We're building rapport. There is skepticism. There always is, Russell said. Until it works. By the end of the week, the creature had begun responding to Russell's hand signals. A slow turn of the wrist prompted it to shift direction. A flat palm meant stop. It didn't always get it right, but it tried, and that mattered. On the 8th day, it refused its meal. Russell knelt beside it. Hey. What's wrong? The creature turned its massive head away. No fever, he muttered, checking its skin. Hydration's fine. Breathing's good. He looked into its eyes. You're upset. Kellex entered, holding a report. You were correct. The creature experienced prior captivity. The ship that transported it to Arkallis was dismantled last cycle. They found traces of neural restraint equipment. Russell sat back. So it's not just trauma. It remembers being controlled. Possibly. The signature matched a Type 4 pacifier collar. Russell swore under his breath. That explains the resistance. We believed it had been domesticated. It was imprisoned, Russell said. Not the same thing. He stood. I need to change the approach. No more enclosures. No more isolation. Kellex frowned. It poses a risk. So do misunderstandings, Russell said. Let it roam. Supervised. Let it choose where to go. You believe autonomy will improve recovery? I believe it's the only chance it has. 2 days later, with perimeter drones in place, the creature was allowed to explore the open habitat deck. It moved slowly at first, testing each step like a diver unsure of the water's depth. Then, cautiously, it began to wander, sniffing at strange plants, pawing at textured walls, flaring its nostrils at distant sounds. Russell followed at a respectful distance, logging everything. When the creature circled back and stood beside him without prompting, he didn't say a word. Just noted the time. That night, he found Varn watching the surveillance feed. You see that? Russell said, pointing at the screen. It came back. I observed. Voluntarily. Means it's beginning to trust the environment. Not just me. Varn looked at him. You are altering our understanding of sentient, non-communicative species. I'm not trying to. I just don't like giving up. A long silence passed before Varn said, "We thought you were primitive." Russell chuckled. "I get that a lot. No advanced devices. No implants. No neural augmentation. Just hands. And time. Why did your species stop at that?" "We didn't. Some just chose differently." Varn nodded slowly. "You are an outlier, but a useful one." Russell raised his cup. To being useful. By the third week, the creature began vocalizing in response to specific stimuli. A high-pitched warble when it saw a barrel. A chuffing grunt when Russell entered. It even chirped once at its reflection in a water panel. Russell started cataloging the sounds. "I think it's developing a language," he said, playing back a recording. Kellex listened. "Or reacquiring one. You think it had a social structure?" "It may have. We never considered it." Russell leaned back. "Then let's find out." He requested access to the Arkallis ship archives, digging through transport logs, biological scans, and offloaded telemetry. After 5 sleepless nights and a lot of very bad coffee, he found a blurry image from a decommissioned freighter showing 3 similar creatures clustered around a feeding station. "There were more," he said to Kellex, dropping the image on the table. "This isn't the only one." Kellex examined the image. "They may have perished. Or they're still out there. What would you do if they are?" Russell looked toward the habitat bay where the creature now napped in a patch of artificial sunlight. "I'd bring them back," he said. "Let them heal. Together." Kellex stared at him. "You are not a rescuer." "No," Russell said. "But I know what loneliness does to a creature." Kellex didn't respond. He simply turned and walked away. The next morning, the creature was waiting for Russell at the gate. He didn't tell it what to do, and it followed him anyway. The creature's breath fogged slightly in the chilled corridor air as it stood beside Russell, its large, splayed feet shifting on the anti-slip surface. It was early what passed for morning aboard the Arkallis station, and the habitat deck was still in its low light cycle. Its pale blue glow cast long shadows along the walls, and the hum of overhead systems was the only sound until the lift doors opened with a soft hiss. Kellex stepped out, flanked by 2 junior medical aides carrying data slates. He glanced briefly at the creature, then at Russell, who was crouched down, fastening a makeshift wrap around the animal's forelimb. "You're bracing it," Kellex said, more observation than question. "Right carpal joints straining," Russell replied without looking up. "Weights shifting unevenly. I measured a 2-degree lean to the left yesterday. If we don't support it, that joint's going to swell." Kellex examined the wrap. "That's repurposed cargo webbing. Hum. It flexes just enough to support movement without cutting circulation. We have synthetic ligament bands. Too rigid. This can breathe. And it costs less than a cup of your cafeteria broth." Kellex made a brief gesture, and one of the aides handed him a slate. "The review board has concluded your therapy protocol achieved what ours did not. They've approved the reclassification." Russell stood, brushing his hands off. "Reclassification?" "The creature is now designated a sentient aligned nonverbal. It will not be subject to containment protocols." Russell turned to the beast, who blinked slowly at him. "That mean we don't have to ask permission to let it walk anymore?" "It means it's no longer property," Kellex said. "It's a patient." Russell smiled faintly. "Took you long enough?" The creature shifted its weight again, and Russell gave its shoulder a reassuring pat. "We've scheduled a full biomechanical scan," Kellex continued, "to assess permanent damage and establish baselines. It will allow us to assemble prosthetic support if necessary." "Schedule it after breakfast," Russell said. "I've got some boiled grain and shredded root blend cooling in the prep room." "It's been favoring those over the protein blocks." Kellex raised a ridge above his left eye. "You're adjusting meal plans again?" "It's digesting better with coarse fiber. I'm not changing it for variety. I'm changing it because the last 2 stool samples had undigested protein crystals. That means it's passing through too fast or not breaking down at all." "You've been analyzing its waste?" "Of course I have," Russell said. "You can learn more from what comes out than what goes in." Kellex hesitated. "That is not a common practice on Arkallis. I'd suggest you change that." He walked toward the feeding station and the creature followed without prompt. The aides stood back, unsure whether to be impressed or concerned. Kelix watched them disappear into the prep area, then turned to Varn, who had entered silently behind him. It listens to him, Kelix said. Varn folded his arms. It chooses to. Inside the prep area, Russell poured a warm mixture into a low basin and slid it toward the creature, who sniffed it once, then began to eat. Russell leaned against the wall, arms crossed. See how it chews slower when it's not swallowing for survival, he said to no one in particular. That's a relaxed jaw. Not panicked. Moments later, the creature paused and looked up. A low, rumbling noise came from its chest. Russell stared. That's new. Beryl, who had been observing from the corner, stepped forward. That is not a distress signal. Nope. That's contentment. Or something close. It's similar to a vocalization pattern we recorded during sedation recovery, but this is voluntary. Russell tapped a hand lightly against his thigh. It's not just healing physically. It's adjusting emotionally. We do not track emotional recovery. You should start. Later that day, after the biomechanical scan confirmed mild but manageable nerve compression in the right shoulder and no lasting spinal damage, Russell sat with the creature in the open habitat zone. It lay beside him, its body curved around in a loose semicircle, breathing steadily. You've come a long way, he said. The creature made a faint throat noise, almost like a snort, though gentler. You know, when I first saw you, I thought you were done for. Not because you were weak, because no one here knew how to look at you properly. He pulled out a folded sheet of material from his coat and started gently cleaning around the creature's eyes, where a bit of dried fluid had crusted. You weren't a problem. You were a puzzle. The kind that doesn't come with instructions. A hand-sized drone floated overhead and projected a soft scan beam across them. Russell waved it off. No more scans. He's had enough for today. The drone hesitated, then drifted away. Kelix approached as Russell finished wiping the cloth clean. The review board has assigned a designation, Subject 4C. No, Russell said flatly. He needs a name. Kelix tilted his head. A name. He's not a file. He's a life. Kelix considered. That is not standard protocol. Doesn't need to be. Name him and he becomes someone. Not something. Kelix looked at the creature. What would you suggest? Russell looked up at the fading lights of the dome above, then down at the beast's steady, sleeping form. Call him Grinlow. Kelix blinked. That has no linguistic origin. Exactly. It's his. No baggage. No expectations. The alien was silent for a moment. Then he nodded once. Very well. Grinlow. Hours later, Russell was preparing to leave the habitat dome when Beryl intercepted him near the access corridor. The crew from the original transport ship has been located, Beryl said quickly. They confirmed there were 2 other creatures. They were separated during cargo inspections. Russell paused. Did they survive? They were rerouted to an ecological exhibit on a civilian moon station. It's not a research facility, but conditions are reportedly safe. Then they're all right? Stable. But they've shown signs of agitation. Unresponsive to handlers. Russell exhaled. That's because they're missing each other. Beryl hesitated. Would you request their transfer? Russell shook his head. They're not my call. But if they're safe, that's enough. He looked back toward the dome, where Grinlow still slept. He's not alone anymore. That's what matters. By the next rotation, Kelix presented a final report to the Arkallis Medical Council. It included a full recovery timeline, adjusted protocols, and a new classification schema for nonverbal sentient creatures showing self-directed behavior. At the end of the report, tucked between appendices, was a single-line entry, Grinlow, patient, not property. As for Russell, he turned down the offer to lead a new interspecies care unit. He left behind a crate of hand-labeled feeding logs, a collection of annotated scans, and a list of care procedures written in thick, blocky handwriting. The last item in the crate was a note written on the back of a ration packet. If it breathes, it matters. If it matters, it heals. Grinlow stayed in the dome, his joints supported, his diet rotated weekly, and his name registered in the Arkallis archives. He was never again referred to by a number. And though Russell returned to Earth weeks later, the dome lights flickered just a bit warmer when Grinlow stirred each morning, as if some part of the man had stayed.